The Honorable Ndindi Nyoro, member for Kiharu.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I just rise to give a few comments. One is that healthcare is very important for the development of any economy. And actually, Honorable Speaker, in many respects, when we talk about healthcare, education is always just around there, because these are social investments which are basically used to build a good working capacity for any nation. While education adds value, just in manufacturing where it adds value, Honorable Speaker, to the primary produce, what education does is to add value to the working force. But also what healthcare does is actually to service the working force or the labor force. And therefore they are very integral even when you look at it in terms of purely or Puritan economy, Honorable Speaker. But there are issues that continue to handicap, and especially delivery of quality healthcare to our country, as has been said before by my colleagues, one being access, but also number two being quality, Honorable Speaker, and access majorly meaning a cost that is involved in seeking quality healthcare in our country. And Honorable Speaker, the other thing that is critical for us to keep thinking about is that when we appropriate money, we are basically showing the signs on the kind of service we want delivered in the country. And Honorable Speaker, I see it as a paradox that healthcare is actually basically a fully devolved function. But when you look at the appropriation of the money that we give to our counties vis-a-vis the money that remains in the national government, Honorable Speaker, that leaves a lot to be desired. And I think we need to walk the talk in terms of devolving even the funds and the resources that are needed for our county governments and our governors to be able to provide quality and accessible healthcare in our country. Honorable Speaker, we also have to think about healthcare as dynamic. We have seen in many countries, Honorable Speaker, that R&D budget for healthcare is always adequate, because the challenges that we face in regards to healthcare, Honorable Speaker, is dissipated by new inventions within the industry. And what makes that possible is the budget for research and development, which, Honorable Speaker, can go in many ways. One can be directly provided by the government, but also number two is to give incentives for even private healthcare facilities to be able to invest in R&D by giving them, Honorable Speaker, incentives even around taxes. Because whatever they do, if you get a reprieve which is cheaper and more efficient in terms of provision of health, that then becomes a public good, Honorable Speaker. And therefore it is no longer an asset of the people who invested in it. It becomes a public good for all the citizenry. And Honorable Speaker, that is what we ought maybe to do in terms of policy, that even the private facilities are given an incentive to do better, to come up with better methods, to come up with better reprieve, because ultimately, Honorable Speaker, that becomes a public good. And lastly, Honorable Speaker, it is important that all of us as people who serve the public, that we must continually always show confidence in the facilities that we provide monies for, even in this house. And Honorable Speaker, it's always an oxymoron that most of the public officers have insurances that cover them outside the public facilities. And Honorable Speaker, we should be the people who should be championing for quality service in those public facilities. It is important, Honorable Speaker, that all public facilities, and especially those who are covered using government resources, that we show confidence in public health facilities by seeking services there, Honorable Speaker, when they are needed. Because it is in that line, Honorable Speaker, that we are able to see the challenges that happens in the public facilities, so that as we legislate, as we provide resources, we are doing it from the point of knowledge. And Honorable Speaker, that goes in line with many developed countries, including the United Kingdom, where even the public servants, including the Prime Minister himself or herself, in that case, Honorable Speaker, they promote national health services, famously known as NHS. Because when you provide the best quality service there, Honorable Speaker, and you are the one leading the population, then the best way to show confidence is when you need those services, Honorable Speaker, then you seek them from the point where you lead. And since you lead the public, then public facility ought to be given a dab of confidence by channeling all the health officers, Honorable Speaker, to be able to seek services in the public facilities. Otherwise, Honorable Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity and I submit.
Thank you. The Honorable Karoli Omondi, member for Suba North.
Suba Kusini, Suba South. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Let me just take it again for record.
Okay.
The member for Suba South.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I rise to contribute to this motion, not fully in support, but partially in support. I've looked at the motion carefully and I've picked 3 issues that I think require debate. One is the concern that the public healthcare services lack adequate funds to guarantee quality healthcare services. That is very true, Honorable Speaker. I think we have subjected our health sector to chronic shortage of adequate funding over the years, both in terms of facilities development, recruitment and payment of good salaries for health workers, but also investment in terms of research and other activities relating to health sector. So that is very clear. I agree with that particular concern. And I've just taken a quick look at what happens in other jurisdictions to emphasize that we are underfunding our health sector. In the United Kingdom, the funding for the health sector as a percentage of the GDP, in other words, the economic output of the UK, is actually 9.6% of their GDP. France is 12%, Germany is 13%, Canada is 13%. Singapore is 12%. And I pick Singapore because it has the second best healthcare service in the world, and also the country where people enjoy the longest life expectancy at 84.5 years. But Madam Speaker, I'm very concerned with the 2 other statements in the motion, appreciating that the use of the comprehensive medical cover by public officers and state officers in public hospitals would guarantee sufficient funding for public hospitals. I submit that this may not be so. As you've just heard, the level of spending on healthcare as a percentage of GDP in the other countries, I don't think the insurance schemes that are given to civil servants or state officers or members of parliament would be sufficient to cover the health service requirements, financial requirements of our country. I don't agree with that, and I would have been happy to see the statistics, but I don't think it is factual. As a matter of fact, I think it would just be a drop in the ocean. But I have a fundamental disquiet and reservation on the main thrust of the motion, that we introduce a policy on mandatory use of public healthcare facilities by all civil servants, public officers, and state officers in the country. Apart from technically being impossible to enforce, I appreciate where this is coming from. As a matter of public confidence, those in position of authority and leadership should actually go to public hospitals. And that is how it is in other jurisdictions. If you go to Germany, 55% of the healthcare facilities are actually public. And by public, I mean publicly funded and publicly owned. Though there's a mixture of what is public. Some are private, some are charitable, some are faith-based, some are university hospitals and the rest. But in Germany, only 38% of the healthcare facilities are charitable. 55% are public. As a matter of fact, only 7% are private. In the UK, 92% of the population use public healthcare facilities, the NHS. And that is whether you're in Wales, England, Northern Ireland, or Scotland. Only 8% use private hospitals. But you see, they do so not as a matter of legal requirement or as a matter of compulsory administrative action. They do so because their hospitals work. So I think the most important question we should ask ourselves is, why do hospitals work in other jurisdictions, public hospitals, and not in our country? And I think it has more to do with other questions other than this. Second, I mean, most fundamentally, if you try to compel a civil servant to go to a particular facility and they go to court, you will not win that case. Because they are matters of choices, they are matters of rights, they are matters of freedom. It would have been neater to limit the application of the medical insurance for public servants, that you insure for purposes of getting treatment in public health facilities. But if you want to go to another, seek another option.
Order, Honorable Karoli. I have a point of order by the Honorable Sabina Chege. What is out of order, Honorable Sabina Chege?
Thank you very much. I just wanted to inform my colleague, Honorable Karoli, that I had indicated earlier.
Honorable Karoli Omondi, would you like to be informed by the mover of this motion?
Yes. I had indicated earlier that there was a slight change on the motion, that we, at the last, how it's reading, that let me see where to start. Through the ministry, that therefore resolved that the government, through the Ministry of Health, implements the Kenya Universal Health Coverage Policy 2020-2030 and introduce a policy on mandatory use of public health care facility by all civil servants, public officers, and state officers who are using medical cover catered by the government of Kenya. That bit was missed out, and I hear you, what you were saying. It was about the medical cover and medical cover that is financed by the government. But public officers or civil servants, they have liberty to choose where they can access their medical care, whether they want to go private or public. But if you are using a medical cover catered for by the taxpayers' money, then the first stop should be in the in the public facility.
Thank you very much.
You may proceed.
Speaker. I thank you for that information, Honorable Sabina Chege. That would be the right approach. However, it would not be right to make it mandatory. It would be an option, so that if I wanted to use my cover in a private facility, then I would be allowed to top up whatever is being charged in the other facility. But I think fundamentally, Honorable Speaker, we have messed our healthcare by devolution. I think I've said it several times here. Healthcare should never have been devolved. Because if you look at the experience of other jurisdictions where health services are working, they are centralized. And if they are not centralized, there are other agencies that provide the health services at the lower levels, but are controlled from a central point at the national level. For universal healthcare to work, which is an insurance scheme, it must be centralized. That is when you have a pool of enough people and enough resources to put together to run a universal healthcare scheme. And I think the good example is the UK, which has the NHS. Even though the NHS, in terms of implementation, is decentralized, it is centralized in that it is fully financed out of the national budget of the United Kingdom. If you go to Germany, they have both federal and local hospitals, but which in terms of implementation are decentralized, but the funding is not decentralized. In Italy, it is centralized. They have something called Servizio Sanitario Nazionale, and health provision and health standards and employment of doctors and health workers are centralized. If you go to Norway, they are centralized. I mean, under the Ministry of Health, though they have regional health service providers. The same in Australia, where they charge a medical levy and health is provided at state level, but funded by the federal government. So I think we need to have a thorough discussion. How do we reorganize our health sector within the framework of devolution without compromising the ability to mobilize adequate resources by pooling, and also providing all the health workers with a common employer, just like we have with teachers, so that the standards of quality of service, quality of payments, quality of the personnel is standardized across the country. If we don't need any further research, we know health sectors cannot be run by the counties. It is obvious. If you go to all the county hospitals, you see it happening. The question is, when will this House or the government be brave enough and try and bring back health under a centralized system? And the national health, the universal health service or coverage will not work within the framework of devolution. Yeah, because they are never intended to work like that. If you look at all the other jurisdictions, and Madam Speaker, I think it is time that we had this debate without burying our heads in the sand that we will look like we are fighting devolution. We are not. It is important that we give our people universal health cover and a standardized across, standards of service across the board. Thank you, Madam Speaker.